Hi everyone, my name is Fio Gede Parma and this is my beloved friend Jane Meredith and my co-author. And we are offering and sharing a reading from our book, Magic of the Iron Pentacle, which Jane Meredith is holding.
Great, and we're going to read to you from the chapter on sex. And this piece is called Sex, Aligning with the Living Cosmos. Sex is the life force itself. It is the star goddess and her birthing of all things. It's the primacy of the human bond, mother to child, and passed down through the ages. The cycle that weaves us together with this green and blue planet we are part of. Sex may include genital engagement with another human being, sensual experiences with others or on our own, the artist's, dancers or gardeners' engagement with their craft, and a deep connection with the divine. When we experience sex in this multifold, essential way as aligning with the living cosmos, it becomes much less separate, not something we can box up or keep limited to a certain time and place or with a particular person. Sex, in its essence, is wild and uncontained, the very breath and heartbeat of us, inseparable from life.
Each of our bodies grew within our mother's or parent's body. From the moment of conception, our body has been undifferentiated from her or them until with our first breath, we become separate. Now we are in the outside world, no longer contained. We experience the limits and totality of our own body. This body, although it will grow and change throughout our lifetime, is the container of all our experience. Its inbuilt drives include needs for food, warmth, shelter, community, and sex. All of the amazing mystery that we are and experience, we accumulate doesn't ever leave that behind. Those instinctual biological requirements. Each human body was created through sex, in sex. The sex of our parents and the sex of an ovum and sperm meeting, igniting, and developing.
Humans are most easily and commonly born head first through the sex organs of our mother. The first part to emerge from the sex of our mother is literally the crown of our heads, and the first point of the Iron Pentacle is sex in the head. Each child is a living embodiment of sex, their parents' sex, which created them, the life-giving act of birth, and their own biological imperative to procreate. Within the child, as within the act of sex, two things have merged, chromosomes from the mother and the father joining to create a third thing. Here is the living mystery of sex, to co-create, to emerge new and unique each time.
Breathing. The breath that allows us to exist outside our mother's body is itself an almost sexual act. Not just the first breath, but every breath. We draw air into our bodies, and we expel it again. We take in and we give out. Our bodies making love not just with air as we interact with its chemistry, translating oxygen to carbon dioxide, but with the planet itself as we breathe in harmony with the trees and plants, supplying the air that they need while they create what we require. It is lovemaking of an essential kind. It merges, it nurtures, it sustains, and continues life. All of our senses as they engage with the world, our taking in of images, of smells, sounds, touches, tastes, can be understood as sexual interactions. We take in these experiences, we merge with them, we respond and give back.
As children, certainly within Western culture, we increasingly learn to divorce ourselves from the lived experience of our bodies. We're taught to value thought, concepts, and the abstract far above bodily experience, sensation, and emotion. we become increasingly estranged from our somatic landscape and leave behind the innocence of existing unquestioningly within our own physical beings. As we grow and are socialized, we become antagonistic towards the primal nature of our bodies, including sensuality and sexuality. We learn these lessons young, but observing children, we can see an immediacy and relatedness to bodies and senses that we as adults have trained ourselves out of. Children express both sensuality and sexuality, curiosity about their bodies and the bodies of others, and a desire for pleasure.
We are taught not to cry when we are hurt or frightened, to be polite no matter what we feel, to obey adult directions, and to think of ourselves, or to think of others rather than ourselves. We are taught to ignore the instincts of our bodies, to cover up nakedness, and to please the adults we depend on. The sensual selfhood a small child exists within, and ownership of and belonging to one's own sensual and physical experiences, is rarely honored or recognized in our cultures. The black heart of innocence is the name that reclaiming and fairy traditions give to our original state. It is the uncorrupted, pure, and wild innocence that we are born into. It is our birthright. We knew it when we were children, but it can still be found deep within all of us. In the iron point of sex, we acknowledge this black heart as holy and sacred. To interfere with it is to interfere with the life force itself.
As we grow, our natural curiosity, sensuality, and sexuality are curtailed. Sometimes it's merely limited or frowned upon, interpreted as an expression of innocence or social ignorance, something the child will be trained or grow out of. But families, schools, and religions carrying ideologies around repression of nature and bodies can also indoctrinate children into a war between their own flesh and spirit. Far from recognizing that spirit and body are two expressions of one thing, these philosophies teach the necessity of subjugating the sinful body to the discipline of the pure spirit. Some children are degraded, abused, or exploited, not just by the culture at large with its purist leaning attitude, but by individual adults. These adults, rating their own desires as more important than the child's welfare or integrity, are rarely the strangers children are taught to fear, but far more frighteningly, are usually trusted family members, friends, and authority figures.
We cannot pretend this is rare. Statistics show that between 1/4 and 1/3 of children in modern Western society experience some degree of sexual abuse before the age of 18. For many of these children, this is not a one-off encounter, although that would be tragic and horrifying in itself, but an ongoing situation, often with years of abuse, molestation, rape, and sexual assault experienced by these small humans. The consequences and social costs of this are almost beyond imagining. How do we propose that people who have experienced this type of abuse should learn to relate in trust or intimacy with others? How will we teach them to form consensual and equal relationships, to care for and listen to their own bodies, to become parents of small children themselves, or to function happily within community?
Many of us have experienced sexual abuse. We have suffered varied forms of exploitation of our bodies, often accompanied by fear, pain, threats, and ongoing emotional and physical repercussions. Some of us became afraid of our own sensuality and desires. We learned to distrust our own bodies, ignore our emotions, and deny our own experience. Some of us had our abilities to trust, to create and share intimacy, and to experience sensual and sexual joy deeply damaged. Some of us learned to hate our bodies and seek refuge in the mental sphere of thoughts divorced from the physical realm. some of us began to punish ourselves or others for any expression of the sensual. And some of us learned to use our sexuality and our bodies as a commodity.
The secrecy and collusion around this within families, communities, and society at large can be as damaging to the individuals who have experienced this as the original abuse. This silence is not accidental. However incomprehensible it seems, statistically, we could conclude that the sexual abuse of children is condoned by our society. Although almost everyone would protest this statement, when we compare the frequency of this crime to other law-breaking activities, it becomes clearer. For example, we would never allow a non-compliance rate of 1/4 to 1/3 of the population when it comes to paying tax or holding a current driving license. If the statistic was that 1/4 to 1/3 of people could expect to be the victims of a knife stabbing or violent robbery during a particular 18-year period of their life, it's hard to imagine this would meet the same level of cover-up silence and in effect acceptance as does child sexual abuse.
Yet even with this history of damage, as adolescents and then as adults, we can and do unfold as sexual beings. Adolescence is a time of self-discovery and experimentation as we seek out ways to express ourselves, including sexually. We talk about sex, engage in sensual and sexual behaviour with ourselves and others, and explore different realms of sexuality, including through media. During teen years, many will become sexually active. This experience is often far from the ideal of experimentation and exploration. Pressures on teenagers include images and stories perpetrated in mass media and pornography, peer expectations, the influence of alcohol and other drugs, natural hormones, and internalized conflicts between the need to belong and rebellion or daring. One of the most evident internalizations of patriarchy's attitudes towards sex and the feminine is in the high incidence of the rape of young women and the physical assault of others considered to be feminine, such as young queer males or transgendered women. All of these factors can lead to adolescents engaging in sex that is pressured, not fully consensual, unsafe, or exploitative. At this time of our lives, we are often uncertain, imbalanced, and fragile. Our vulnerabilities can be weaknesses, and our desires may betray us.
In adolescence, we also move toward empowerment and freedom, experiencing far more autonomy over our bodies, activities, and social groupings than we had as children. One of these freedoms is in language and communication around sex. The range and number of words and terms we use to refer to sexuality has expanded enormously. Often these are words that have been wielded as insults, illustrating the overculture's denigration of the body and sexuality. Some more experimental and radically inclined youth work with these words and phrases to embrace the body and their sexuality. Words such as gay, queer, dyke, cunt, and asexual have entered mainstream language no longer as insults, but as proud descriptors.
The generational shifts through the last 100 years mean that our experiences of thinking and talking about sex are radically different from those of our grandparents and great-grandparents. Writing this book, at one stage, we lay on a bed together talking about sex. We spoke of recent sexual experiences each of us had had, and how in these experiences we had rewritten previous learnings of sex and intimacy. We talked of our longings, our joy in connection and sex, and the places where we felt lost, unable to relate, or afraid. It felt radical, speaking in this uninhibited, exploratory way. We reflected later that for this conversation to occur was almost unimaginable in any previous time, unless we had been lovers. We felt unrecognisable to even our parents' generation, let alone our grandparents. It was a good conversation.
So we hope that you have enjoyed, been provoked by, connected with this reading. It is the first major essay of the 5 points of Iron Pentacle in this book, Magic of the Iron Pentacle, which Jane Meredith is holding up, which was published in early 2016 by Llewellyn. And we hope you, if you haven't already read it, we hope you read it again and tell your friends about it and buy it.
And I guess in the book also, as well as these essays, these stories of what we think that means, sex in the Iron Pentacle, there are lots of exploratory exercises, rituals, spells, and processes for the reader to engage in, to work with their own realities and imaginings around each point of the Iron Pentacle.
And obviously these are our perspectives, our experiences. The book is also filled with memoir written by both Jane Meredith and myself. And yeah, we offer this humbly and passionately and audaciously to the world, that it may provoke the work of the Iron Pentacle. Blessed be.